In the Penn Museum in Philadelphia, in the Near East section, there is a clay tablet. Not the largest in the collection, not the most beautiful. The surface is chipped along one edge, and part of the signs is lost. In the museum catalog, it appears under the marking CBS 10,413. This tablet came from Nippur, the sacred city of the Sumerians, where for millennia the principal religious and literary texts of Mesopotamia were kept. It is roughly 4,000 years old. The text on it is written in cuneiform, in the Sumerian language. And in that text a place is described, a place where there is no death, where there is no illness, where the lion does not kill, and the wolf does not carry off the lamb, where there is no old woman who calls herself old, where there is no old man who calls himself old. This is the Sumerian paradise. Its name is Dilmun. And I want to begin with one simple question. Not whether the Garden of Eden actually existed. Not whether the biblical flood took place. A different one. Why does the literal, literary description of a paradise, with underground sources of water, with forbidden plants, with a goddess whose name means both rib and life, lie on a clay tablet inscribed at least 1,500 years before Moses or anyone else recorded the book of Genesis? To understand what is on this tablet, you first need to know how it arrived in Philadelphia. At the end of the 19th century, the Penn Museum organized a series of expeditions to Nippur. It was one of the first American archaeological campaigns in the Near East. 4 expeditions, from 1888 to 1900. They were led first by John Peters, then by John Henry Haynes. On the ground worked a young Assyriologist named Hermann Hilprecht. Over the course of these expeditions, roughly 30,000 cuneiform tablets were lifted from the soil of Nippur. The figure is not an exaggeration. 30,000. They were split. A portion remained at the Archaeological Museum in Istanbul, because Nippur at that time lay within the Ottoman Empire, and local law required that a share of finds remain in country. The rest were shipped to Philadelphia. Among the tablets that arrived in Pennsylvania in the early 20th century were several copies of the same text. Assyriologists named it Enki and Ninhursag, after the 2 gods who act in it. The copies had varying states of preservation, some better, some worse. The text of the myth was reconstructed by combining fragments into a single whole. The principal copy is the one listed under CBS 10,413. Deciphering it did not happen all at once. Sumerian is not a Semitic language. It is not related to Akkadian, not related to Hebrew, not related to Arabic. It is a linguistic isolate, a language with no known relatives. It had to be reconstructed using dictionaries compiled by the Babylonians for their own use, because already in the 2nd millennium before Christ, Sumerian was a dead language. The first coherent translation of the myth appeared in the early 1930s. Stephen Langdon, the same Oxford Assyriologist who deciphered the Weld-Blundell prism with the king list, published one of the early versions. Later the text was refined by Samuel Noah Kramer and by Thorkild Jacobson. And once the translation was complete, the questions began. Because here is what is written on the tablet. The action takes place in Dilmun. The text describes it at the very beginning, slowly, in measured pace, with repetitions in the typical Sumerian manner. Dilmun is called a pure place, a holy place, a bright place. These 3 formulas recur, like a litany. In Dilmun, the raven does not croak. The Itidu bird does not cry out the cry of the Itidu bird. The lion does not kill. The wolf does not carry off the lamb. The wild dog does not know how to devour the kid. The wild boar does not know how to devour the grain. The widow does not need to spread out a garment on the roof to dry it of tears. The bird in the sky does not weep for its chick. The dove does not coo with the coo of the dove. No one says, "My eyes hurt." No one says, "My head hurts." No one says, "I am an old woman." No one says, "I am an old man." The unmarried girl does not wash herself in the city. The man crossing the bridge does not weep. The mourner does not say, "Alas." The singer does not sing the song of grief. This is not a general phrase about a good place. It is a very concrete, almost legal list of what does not exist in Dilmun. Each item is the absence of a specific suffering familiar to people of the Bronze Age in Mesopotamia. Eye disease, headache, old age, hunger, predators, mourning. And one more thing is absent from Dilmun: fresh water. This is where the action of the myth begins. The goddess Ninti, Enki's consort in one version, addresses him with a request. The city is beautiful, but without water it cannot become a city. Enki gives an order. He addresses the sun god Utu, quote, 6, Utu brings the water, and Dilmun becomes what it was meant to be: a garden, a city, a place where trees grow, fruit ripens, birds sing, but do not weep, where ships arrive bearing cargo, where fields spread out. This moment matters. Remember it. The water in Dilmun arrives from below, not from above, not as rain, from the earth, from underground sources, from the mouth of a river running underground. This is a specific hydrological detail. Open the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 6, quote 7. Before any rain had fallen, before the human being appeared, the water in the original Eden comes from below, not from above. Mist rising from the earth. This is the second descriptive element that resembles neither the classical biblical quote 8 nor the typical Mesopotamian myths of flooding. It is a very specific, far from obvious detail, and it is present in both texts. Then, 4 rivers. Genesis, chapter 2, verses 10 through 14, quote 9. Hiddekel is the Tigris, that much is known. It is the Sumerian and Akkadian name of the river. Perath is the Euphrates, that too is known. 2 of the 4 rivers of Eden are the 2 great rivers of Mesopotamia, the same 2 between which Sumerian Dilmun lay. Pishon and Gihon have not been definitively identified. Different scholars have proposed different candidates: the Karun in modern Iran, the Wadi al-Ruma in Arabia, tributaries of the Nile. But the geographic anchoring to the Tigris and Euphrates is direct. Eden is located in the region of the 2 rivers of Mesopotamia. That is, in the same geographic point as Sumerian Dilmun. Dilmun in Sumerian texts is described as a place quote 10 where fresh and salt converge. That place is the mouth of the Tigris and Euphrates as they empty into the Persian Gulf. More precisely, an island in the Persian Gulf, modern Bahrain. And here is where the most interesting part begins. Because Dilmun is not a myth in the sense of quote 11. It is a real island, with a real geography. Geoffrey Bibby, a Danish archaeologist from the University of Aarhus, spent 23 years on Bahrain, from 1950 to 1973. 23 years of digging. Beneath the modern city of Manama, he uncovered the remains of a Bronze Age city, huge by the standards of its time, with temples, with a port, with trade warehouses. Bibby was not the first to suspect the link. Back at the end of the 19th century, the Englishman Ernest Durand examined the burial mounds on the island and proposed that they were pre-Phoenician. In the early 20th, the Dane Peter Brun Knudsen sketched the first map of the settlements. But it was Bibby, with a team of architects, epigraphers, and geologists, who carried out the systematic excavation that made it possible to date the strata. The principal site, Qalat al-Bahrain, has 7 archaeological levels. The lowest of them goes back to the 3rd millennium before Christ, that is, to a time when Sumer was already Sumer. In those strata, they found cylinder seals very similar to Mesopotamian ones, but with a regional style of their own. The seals depict scenes typical of Sumerian iconography: banquets, hunting, mythological beings. This means that Bahrain was not a backwater of the Sumerian world, but an active node, a trading partner, possibly a spiritual center. In the Sumerian administrative documents from Lagash and Ur, hundreds of thousands of clay tablets, through which the economy of the 3rd millennium is reconstructed, Dilmun is mentioned frequently. From there come copper, lapis lazuli, ivory, pearls, aromatic resins. To there are sent wool, grain, leather goods. This is routine trade, not myth. And the same Dilmun in the literary texts is described as a place where there is no death, where a goddess gives birth to a goddess from a rib. These are not 2 different Dilmuns. It is the same one. For the Sumerians, there was no split between an economic and a mythological perception of geography. The real island was simultaneously a place of myth. In 1969, Bibi published a book entitled, literally, Looking for Dilmun. In it, he shows step by step how the archaeological data from Bahrain, the linguistic data from Sumerian texts, and the trade routes of the Bronze Age all converge on a single point. The Dilmun of Sumerian myth and the Bahrain of Persian Gulf geography are the same place. Most specialists in the history of the region agree with that conclusion. In 2005, UNESCO added the principal site of Bahrain, Qalat al-Bahrain, to the World Heritage List. The official reason? Quote 16. But the most curious detail, the one that proves the reality of the myth, is not archaeological. It is hydrological. In the Persian Gulf off the northern coast of Bahrain, at depths of between 3 and 10 meters below the seabed, there exist freshwater springs. They emerge directly into the salt sea. Local pearl divers have used them for millennia, descending with specialized water skins and drawing fresh water from where it gushes out from beneath the sea floor. The phenomenon is documented in Greek authors, in medieval Arab geographers, in 19th century European travelers. It is measured in modern hydrogeological work. It is real. The Greek geographer Strabo, writing in the 1st century before Christ, mentions the island of Tylos, as the Greeks called Bahrain, and reports that beneath the sea, off its coasts, there are freshwater springs known to every sailor of the region. The 10th century Arab geographer al-Masudi confirms the same. In the 19th century, officers of the East India Company, while mapping the Gulf, marked some of these springs on their charts. In the 20th century, hydrogeologists traced their origin. The underground aquifers of the Arabian Peninsula, running eastward, emerge into the sea precisely in the area of Bahrain. Rainwater that once fell on the mountains of western Arabia has filtered for millennia beneath the desert, and now resurfaces beneath the seafloor, tens of thousands of kilometers from the place where it soaked into the ground. That is, the water in Dilmun really does come from below, from the earth, from the mouth of a river running underground. In the literal sense. The Sumerian myth does not describe a made-up miracle. It describes a real geological feature of a real island. Think about what that means. A text inscribed around 1900 before Christ, on clay in Nippur, describes a concrete hydrological feature of an island in the Persian Gulf. A feature that can be verified from a boat, that pearl divers still know by name, that is described in modern scientific publications. And the same feature, water arriving from below, in the first garden, is described in the Book of Genesis some 1,500 years later. This is not a common motif. It is not the familiar quote 17. It is a specific technical detail of a specific location, repeated in 2 texts, separated by a millennium and hundreds of kilometers. If any of you have ever been to Bahrain, write to me. Tell me whether you saw the ancient mounds of the site, or, perhaps, swam over those very freshwater springs. I get astonishing stories from viewers who have lived in the region. Many of them heard from older relatives local traditions in which echoes of Sumerian motifs survived in folklore far longer than one would expect at first glance. And if among you there are linguists, specialists in Semitic languages, or simply people who read Genesis in the original, pay particular attention to what comes next, because the linguistic parallel we are about to reach is the strongest one ever found between a Sumerian text and the Book of Genesis. And in no popular book about the Bible will you most likely find it. Let us return to tablet CBS 10,413, to the strangest part of the myth. After Dilmun receives water, plants appear in it. The goddess Ninhursag, Mother Earth, the chief fertility goddess of the Sumerian pantheon, grows 8 plants. They are her creation. They are sacred. They are special. And so Enki, seeing those plants, wants to know what they are. He orders his servant, the 2-headed gatekeeper god named Isimud, to gather them. The servant brings each plant. Enki eats the first. Quote 18, he asks. The servant explains. Enki eats the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. The Sumerian text says that he, quote, 19, that is, he took their essence into himself through eating. This was not ordinary food. It was an act of possession. Ninhursag erupts in fury. She utters a curse. In the text, it goes like this, quote, 20. That means, I will withdraw my life-giving gaze. I doom him to decline. And she leaves the world. Enki falls ill. One part of the body for each plant he ate. 8 organs hurt him: tooth, jaw, neck, side, and, among others, rib. The gods are in alarm. Without Ninhursag, Enki will die. And without Enki, who will rule the waters, without which life does not exist? They send a fox to find Ninhursag. The fox is the only animal in Sumerian texts that possesses the cleverness needed to find and persuade the goddess. The fox finds her, persuades her to return. Ninhursag comes back to Dilmun. She places Enki by her womb and asks, 21. He names one of the painful parts. She speaks a name, the name of the goddess that will be born from that pain. The goddess is born. The pain leaves. I want to dwell on this rite of healing, because there is a detail in it that usually escapes notice in retellings. When Ninhursag returns, she does not simply cure Enki. She performs a ritual. She places him next to her womb. That is the position of birthing, the same position in which Sumerian goddesses are depicted giving birth. Then she asks, quote, 22, Enki names. She speaks a name, the name of the goddess that will be born from that pain. The goddess is born. The pain dissolves. This is not healing in the ordinary sense. It is recreation. The goddess translates pain into the form of a new being. From each diseased part of Enki, a separate healing goddess is born, with her own name. Each name begins with the word quote, 23, meaning quote, 24, and each name contains the root of the body part from whose pain that goddess was born. The goddess born of the tooth pain is called Ninkasid, quote 25. From the jaw, Natsi. From the side, Ninsutu, that is, quote 26. From the limb, Ensagme. From neck, ear, throat. Other names, each carrying its own linguistic trace of the part from which she emerged. 8 organs, 8 names, each a precise mark of where it came from. And when they come to the rib, Ninhursag speaks the name. The goddess born of the pain in Enki's rib is called Ninti. And now, the crucial point. In the Sumerian language, the word ti has 2 simultaneous meanings. The first, rib. The second, life, to live, to give life. These are not homonyms. It is not a pun. It is simply a fact of Sumerian vocabulary. The same sign T, the same sounds, designate both the rib as part of the body and life as a state. In the Sumerian dictionaries compiled by the Babylonians themselves in the 1st millennium before Christ, both meanings stand under the same entry. For this reason, the name Ninti means 2 different things at once: Lady of the Rib and Lady who gives life. The goddess who heals Enki of the pain in his rib is the goddess of life. Now Genesis. Chapter 2, verses 21 and 22. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib, which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman. Then, chapter 3, verse 20. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Eve, in Hebrew, is Hawa. It derives from the root Haya, meaning to live, to give life. Mother of all living is not merely an epithet, it is a direct translation of the name. From a rib, a being is created, whose name means life that gives life. Samuel Noah Kramer, the chief Sumerologist of the 20th century, who worked at the Penn Museum for almost his entire career, noticed this parallel in the 1950s. In 1956, he published a book with a bold title, History Begins at Sumer. It contains a chapter devoted precisely to this link between Ninti and Eve. Kramer was not a marginal figure. He was professor of Assyriology, author of the standard textbook of the Sumerian language, editor of dictionaries. At the Penn Museum, he spent more than 40 years studying that very collection of tablets brought back by the 19th century expeditions. No one in the 20th century read more lines of Sumerian than he did, and he was the first to say publicly, between Ninti and Eve, there is not a resemblance, but a linguistic trace. Kramer formulated it this way. In Hebrew, the idea of a woman from a rib has no internal explanation. Why specifically the rib? Why should the woman created from the rib be called the mother of all living? In the Hebrew language, there is no link between rib and life. These are different roots, different words, different concepts. But in Sumerian, the link exists, and it lies within the language itself. That is, according to Kramer, the biblical account is the surviving trace of a Sumerian pun that lost its meaning in translation. Someone, at some point, heard the Sumerian ti, meaning both rib and life, and wrote the story down in another language. In that other language, the pun vanished, but the image, the woman from the rib, the mother of all living, remained. This is a linguistic imprint, a trace of transmission that cannot be accidental. Because in Hebrew, this link makes no sense. In Sumerian, it does. Kramer's hypothesis provoked vigorous debate. Some scholars accepted it at once. Others objected. You cannot build a theory of transmission on a single pun. But over the 70 years since, more linguists have joined the Sumero-biblical parallel. William Hallow of Yale, the very same Thorkild Jacobson, and many others. They began to find new parallels, names, formulas, ritual structures. Today, the link between Ninti and Eve in the academic literature on comparative mythology is standard, cited in every serious handbook of Near Eastern history. The only thing still debated is the mechanism of transmission. Whether it was oral tradition that passed through the Canaanite tribes, or direct acquaintance with Babylonian literature on the part of Hebrew scribes during the exile, or something else. But the link itself is recognized. A single Sumerian syllable, underscore underscore, quote underscore, 50 underscore underscore, left its mark on one of the best known lines of Genesis. It is in the textbooks. This is not a fringe theory. One such case is a coincidence. Two are a parallel. Three are a pattern. We already have more than 5. Let me list them as bullet points, so they can be seen all at once. In Dilmun, there is no illness, no death, no predation. In Eden before the fall, the same. In Dilmun, water arrives from below, from the mouth of an underground river. In Eden, water rises from the earth as mist. The geography of Dilmun is the mouth of the Tigris and Euphrates. The geography of Eden, the same Tigris and Euphrates. In Dilmun, there are forbidden plants that Enki violates. In Eden, there is a forbidden fruit that the humans violate. The violation of the prohibition carries the threat of death, in one text as in the other. After the violation, the chief deity issues a threat. Quote 51 in the Sumerian, quote 52 in Genesis. After the violation, Enki falls ill in the rib. After the violation, Adam loses a rib. The goddess born from Enki's rib is the Lady of Life. The woman made from Adam's rib is, quote, 5-4. 8 parallels. Concrete, detailed, not abstract, quote, 5-5. That would be too easy to explain by a shared human archetype, but concrete narrative and linguistic nodes. Underground water, the same rivers, forbidden plant, threat of death, rib. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 5-6, underscore, underscore. This is not coincidence. It is transmission, and I will add one more detail that usually escapes attention. In Genesis, after Adam and Eve have eaten the forbidden fruit, God enters the garden. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 57, underscore, underscore. He calls to Adam, quote, 58, quote. And when Adam answers that he hid because he was naked, there follows a series of questions, quote, 59, quote. This is an interrogation scene. The higher being arrives and asks as if he did not know, or pretends not to know, and demands explanations. In the Sumerian myth, the gods too come with questions. They are alarmed. Enki is dying and they do not know what to do. They send the fox to find Ninhursag, because only she knows what happened. Only she can explain. And when Ninhursag returns, she too questions Enki. She asks, even though being a goddess, she knows the answer. It is a formal dialogue, a ritual of acknowledgement. In both texts, a higher being, after the transgression, arrives, walks through the garden, asks questions. This is a very specific narrative structure that does not appear, for instance, in Egyptian or Canaanite mythology. It does appear in the Sumerian text and in Genesis. We can look at this on a larger scale. In the Sumerian text, quote 61 another text, also from Nippur, it is told how the first civilization arose at Eridu. Eridu, the first city founded by the god Enki. Eridu in Sumerian cosmology is the point from which history begins, from which, quote, 62, as the Sumerian king list puts it. Eridu is a real site. The mound of Tel Abu Shahrain in southern Iraq, approximate coordinates, 30 degrees and 48 minutes north, 45 degrees and 59 minutes east. Excavations at Eridu were carried out as early as the mid-19th century by Taylor, then in the early 20th by Campbell Thompson, and finally with the large 1946-49 campaign under the direction of the Iraqi archaeologists Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd. They uncovered 18 superimposed temples, built one on top of another, beginning in the 5th millennium before Christ. Beneath the lowest known temple no one dug, the funding ran out. Beneath Eridu, the subterranean ocean of fresh water, the same one the Sumerian texts call Abzu. Eridu is a real city, sitting literally on the water that in the Sumerian mind is the source of life. Dilmun is a real island, in whose underwater springs that same fresh water emerges. 2 points of beginning, 2 places linked to Enki, 2 places linked to subterranean waters. Dilmun in Sumerian texts is another point. Not a city, but a garden. Not a seat of kingship, but a place of rest for the gods. But both are linked to Enki. Both are linked to the waters of the Abzu, the underground ocean of fresh water that in Sumerian thought lies beneath the earth and feeds the world. In Eden, too, there is a point of beginning, a garden, from which humanity sets out, from which it is driven. In both cases, a place that was, and that can no longer be reached. Dilmun is guarded. Eden is guarded. One cannot return. To the tree of life in Eden, a cherub is set with a flaming sword. To the center of Dilmun, there is no road. Only the gods can come there. And one more parallel text, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 9. After the death of his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh sets out to find immortality. He passes through Mount Mashu, the mountain that lies between the worlds. He enters an underground tunnel through which only the sun god Utu walks. 12 double hours he goes in the dark, and emerges on the other side. There, a garden. Trees that bear, instead of fruit, rubies and lapis lazuli. Leaves of carnelian. Turquoise berries on the branches. Everything of precious stone. Garden of the gods. A garden into which no mortal may enter, but Gilgamesh has come through, because his mother was a goddess. The text of the tablet describes that garden with a very specific precision. The vine bears fruit of agate, the thorns of obsidian, the roots of copper. These are not merely beautiful words. They are a list of stones with concrete symbolic meaning for the Sumerians and Akkadians. Lapis lazuli is the color of the sky. Carnelian, the color of blood. Turquoise, the color of water. The garden of the gods is built from the materials of which the world is made, but in pure, concentrated form. Not earth, but stone. Not flesh, but crystal. It is the garden as a world, before the world became material. A description of creation arrested at the stage that precedes the appearance of living flesh. Gilgamesh passes through the garden, reaches the sea, and beyond the sea comes to Utnapishtim, the one mortal who received immortality, and from Utnapishtim to a plant capable of restoring youth. He obtains the plant, and loses it. A serpent carries it away while the hero is asleep. Remember that detail. A garden at the edge of the world, a plant that gives life, a serpent that takes it away from man. This is Tablet 9 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, a text composed roughly 1,000 years before the serpent appears in Genesis to take from Adam and Eve the right to immortality in the garden. That garden is beyond the human world, beyond the mountain, beyond the underground passage. But it exists, and it recalls Eden, a place where the trees are special, where the fruit is not like the fruit of ordinary trees, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, trees of precious stone. 3 separate Sumerian and Akkadian descriptions of a special garden, a special place of origin, a special place of inaccessibility. Dilmun, the myth quotes 63. Eridu, the text quotes 64. The Garden of the Gods, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And one text in Genesis in which the details of all 3 converge. This is the pattern. I do not know what exactly happened in the chain of transmission. I do not know who read the Sumerian tablets and retold their images in other languages. I do not know how many intermediate versions, Akkadian, Canaanite, Aramaic, this story passed through before it was fixed in the book of Genesis. I do not know whether there was a single moment of borrowing or a slow diffusion of images across a millennium. I know something else. Tablet CBS 10413 has been in the Penn Museum since the early 20th century, accessible to researchers. The translation of the myth, __, quote _ 65 __, has been published in the academic literature since the 1930s. The comparison with Genesis was described by Samuel Noah Kramer in the book, quote, 66, in 1956, and confirmed by dozens of later works. The linguistic link between quote 67 as quote 68 and quote 69 is fixed in the standard Sumerian dictionaries. Dilmun has been identified with Bahrain, the site of Qalat al-Bahrain, entered the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2005. The full translation of the myth is available free of charge in the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature at the University of Oxford. The ETCSL site, text number 1.1.1. And yet most people who read Genesis have never heard of Ninti. Most believers who know the story of Eden have no idea that almost every one of its key details, underground water, the Tigris and Euphrates, a forbidden plant, a rib, the one who gives life, was already written down 1,500 years before Moses or anyone else picked up a reed pen. Not because the facts are classified, they are open, published, sitting in a museum that sells admission tickets. The tablets exist, the translation is published, the linguistic trace is on record, the geography is confirmed, the parallel is documented. The question of how, exactly, the story of Dilmun, the pure, holy, bright place where the goddess of the rib became the goddess of life, traveled the road from Sumerian clay tablets to the 2nd chapter of the book of Genesis, is open since 1956, when Kramer wrote his chapter, Paradise, the first parallels with the Bible. It is open today. Thank you for watching, and if you found it of interest, well, Dilmun is far from the only story that has traveled such a road. In the Sumerian library lie accounts of the flood, of the confusion of tongues, of the first man, and each of them is reflected in the first chapters of the book of Genesis with the same recognizability. Maybe I'll see you in the next.